Boys, welcome to episode 50.
50-ish. 50-ish.
It's like 52, somewhere around there. I don't know. Of Chilluminati podcast, I am always one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by my other two co-hosts, Alex Fasciani.
I am
Hello,
also
sir.
always one of your hosts.
You are also always one of my hosts. And then, honestly, I think the only one, we've done one episode where Jesse wasn't here.
What do you mean?
I think it was episode 3.5. There was an episode where you were traveling very early on, and me and Alex
like
did
out
a
of the country or something. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. And so,
I'm ashamed that I let you two run rampant with one episode, even if it was a 0.5 episode. How dare I?
That was the 5G
How dare I let
episode.
the community down? The 5G episode? Well, all right. That's obviously true. So
we
it's
can
fine.
only cover such truths when you are away.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm super pumped for this episode today, gentlemen. I have to say, I know I said this is Skinwalker. Going into this is like double the amount of research, double the amount of time put into this. Today, we're talking about the start, at the very least, of Roswell.
The holiest of holies.
The holiest
Oh,
of
boy.
holies. It's the beginning of a lot of things. If we ever want to do more alien things that are more niche, you really have to cover Roswell and the two crashes around that area, because this is a lot of people's introduction to MJ-12, to even what grays are as a whole. This is kind of where it all bubbles up. And so I want to start, I'm excited to start this multi-parter, this giant journey, but we couldn't do it without Deanna. Deanna, thank you. We're talking 4 books of research. We're going to go over our sources here in a minute, but I got to pitch it off to Alex first, because there would be no Deanna if there was no Patreon.
That's right.
Oh, we're still doing this?
That's right. And we can't afford it, but if you can imagine In the Arms of an Angel playing under this, please, if you love this show, reach into your hearts and help us out with a few dollars a month, whatever you can afford, because you are enabling us to have weekly episodes. You are enabling us to have professionally done research, and you are able to eventually get all of us together in a very scary place to do something that we haven't really figured out yet. So if that sounds tied to you and you love minisodes, head on over to patreon.com/Chilluminatipod, where you
can also, you're going to get all that research as well, so you can see what you're paying for. 'Cause there's
All that research.
a lot of it.
All of it.
No.
All that research.
My notes have like my jokes in them too.
They
which is
do.
funny.
They actually have the jokes
Yeah,
written in.
so if you ever want to see how crazy I am, just read my notes.
I don't like that. You have joke notes?
Not like every joke that I say is in there, but like, I like to have a
Bits, little fun bits.
Yes.
I like to have a vibe of levity when I tell the story, because I don't want people to fuck up and actually take it totally serious. You get what
Unlike
I'm saying?
today's episode, where I want you to take this deathly seriously.
If there was
so
a Mount
important.
Chilmore desecrating the Black Hills of South Dakota, on it, you would see a flying saucer to represent Roswell, New Mexico. The George Washington, who is not on Mount Rushmore. He's been replaced by a big alien with big eyes, and he's there. And
What? Wait, so your Mount Rushmore is a crashed UFO.
Yeah.
yeah,
I can see it in the side lodged.
it's like a crashed
Obvious-
UFO, but instead of like a face, it's crashed into like a big alien's face, like the one from the autopsy video.
Sure.
So in this
Okay,
timeline,
so-
we had to do.
An alien. An alien. All right, what are the other 3?
Big
Teddy Roosevelt is replaced by Mothman, obviously.
Yeah, Mothman's obviously got to be up there.
Jefferson
Right.
is Bigfoot, and
Okay, yeah.
And-
so who's Lincoln?
See, Lincoln should be Bigfoot. I don't know.
just because of the beard,
Yeah,
of the
the
beard?
big head,
should
the
be
hairy
Bigfoot.
face,
he's a little bit more associated with the outdoors. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then Jefferson. Who's Jefferson?
Who is the smiling man, injured cold?
I feel like he has to be one of the, like, some sort of sea creature.
Well, what about the Loch Ness monster?
Well, is that an American thing?
Oh,
though?
okay, all right. I didn't realize that the Mount Chilmore was the American
It's
cryptid.
the American version,
Okay.
please. What if it's just a
cryptid.
thing representing the Bermuda Triangle?
Just a big ass
Like his
triangle.
face is
Just a triangle.
just a triangle?
Triangle, and it's just a giant airplane black box. with a thermometer in its mouth and a handkerchief around its head, like it's got a fever from the 1920s.
I like it. I like it.
Done. Perfect.
Fan art, please.
Nailed it.
No, the Boston Bean Boy's got to get up there at some point. He's
Can
just
we
at the
shout
top
out
somewhere.
to all the fucking incredible, like, comic book quality Boston Bean Boy fucking art that we
need to keep this going. Boston Bean Boy art. We need to, if we can get a Wikipedia page on, like, some sort of paranormal website.
There's a
or, like,
cryptid
there's
version
a
of
wiki
Wikipedia, so.
Yeah, if we can start making that, but don't reference this podcast at all, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If you think Shepard Fairey is out there listening to episodes of Chilluminati, we want the Boston Bean Boy to be the next Andre the Giant. Like, let's get that BBB, you know,
Boston Baked Bean Boy, BBBB.
The Boston Baked Bean Boy.
Yeah, that's how he is.
B4
because he steals your legal nugs.
He's stealing nugs.
Yeah.
Legal nugs.
Legal nugs.
Legal nugs.
He's only in the states where it's legal.
Yeah.
And we need to just get him out there. Keep talking about him. We need a shirt.
Yeah, we're gonna get some merch.
We need people out there to just reference him in conversation.
And if somebody
like,
could,
like the Boston Baked Bean Boy.
If somebody could see him, that would be great.
Yeah, you could, just spot him somewhere.
If you could somehow get shaky camera footage of the Boston Baked Bean Boy getting your legal nugs, that would be great.
This is what you back and fund on Patreon.
The alien in the driveway, the alien that's like
the one that looks like Dobby.
yeah, the wobbly leg one.
You get a Boston Baked Bean Boy in the driveway.
Slapping on down the block.
Oh my god, dude. I love this stupid fucking. This is what you fund at Patreon. Thank you, everybody. This is the best. We're definitely gonna get some merch up for the Boston Baked Bean Boy. We got Schlorp merch coming. Keep your eyes out.
How far have we fallen? What
or how high have we ascended, gentlemen?
I'm the Patreon guy, and I'm disgusted by our own market savvy at this point.
Is it market savvy?
Boston Baked Bean Boy needs a shirt. I'd wear that shirt proudly.
Me too, dude. Are you kidding me?
He has to say
again.
Yeah.
He does not.
No, that's what he's shouting. He's yelling it.
He's in a speech bubble next to him.
Legalize it.
Or he sounds like John F. Kennedy. Legalize it.
We need to, on this shirt, we can't have it related to this podcast. The shirt needs to say, I went to Boston and all I saw was the Bean Boy. So we need like a shirt that looks like you bought it at a Boston tourist shop.
I agree.
I bought legal
like
weed in Boston and it got stolen by the Boston Baked Bean.
Yeah, like that. Oh, man.
Yes. We need that.
Okay.
Have you seen my weed?
We need to tap an artist. We got to hire somebody to whip up a little art, and that's what we need to do.
We needed to not have any reference to this podcast. We need to start this grassroots where in 20 years from now, people are like, I saw him. I saw him out on the street stealing sweet nugs. I know this is happening.
I knew it was him because they were legal nugs.
All right. Thank you guys for allowing us to do our nonsense. We have to divert into the more serious stuff now. Roswell, New Mexico. First, we want to acknowledge our sources for those who like to read along in the book club, both in and out of the Discord. If you like to read along with us, we have 4 major books that we used for research here. The first one is Crash at Corona, the U.S. Military Retrieval and Cover-Up, the 2004 edition specifically. The authors of this are Don Berliner and Stanton Friedman. Don Berliner has been a long-time journalist, aviation historian, been writing full-time for 30 years, has been a newspaper reporter and photographer, assistant editor, Capitol Hill correspondent, a bunch of other stuff. Stanton Friedman actually has his Master's of Science in Nuclear Physics. He was employed by a bunch of high-end places like Aerojet, General Nucleonics, General
Motors. Now spends most of his time on Coast to Coast AM.
and then in 1970, he went and pursued the scientific investigation of UFOs full time. USOs, different, totally different.
They're doing
entirely
something,
different.
I tell you. They're bringing all those people around the world.
How can they do it?
How can they do it all in one night?
Only with a UFO. Also, the other books, The Roswell Incident, the classic study of UFO contacts. This is particularly used for interviews. A lot of this book is basically just a compilation of interviews of people around that time. Then we've got UFO Crash at Roswell. We use that for research and a bunch of articles and whatnot. We're not going to go into the details, but if you want the books, those 3 books are the major sources for this bundle of episodes that you're going to get. The Roswell incident in particular is kind of like a modern day fairy tale at this point. It's a modern folklore story told to those in circles who care about that sort of shit anyway. It's an event so covered up in its own lies, deceit, backtracking of statements, released, unreleased, re-released, and modified, but otherwise unchanged. And there's a lot that went into the Roswell incident that makes it very confusing, even for those who believe that it was a weather balloon in the end of it all. I'm going to give my full opinion at the end of this series, but suffice to say, if this is all about a weather balloon, it's insane the lengths that they went to cover it all up. For weeks in late June, leading up to July in 1947, reports of dazzling lights, mysterious objects, and UFOs were running rampant in the area. During that time, an object of some sort crashed into a nearby sheep ranch, spreading debris over a square mile. On July 8, 1947, a press release went out to the news stations across the country. This press release, first issued by First Lieutenant Walter Haut under direct orders from Colonel William Blanchard, stated the following, and I quote, The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the either Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers in the sheriff's offices of Chaves County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such a time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was taken immediately, and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. End quote. That was the report that went out.
I love that they call it a disc. That's so funny to me.
They called it a disc.
Transport the disc.
Yep. It's bizarre. However, following that crazy information and press release, not 3 hours later, another message got sent out rectifying the claim that it was not indeed a flying saucer or disc, but instead a weather balloon. While behind the scenes, while they were put that correction out, the United States Air Force packed up the remnants of this balloon into a B-29 Super Fortress flown by the 509th out of Roswell to Fort Worth with Major Marcel inside the plane. The literal exact plane that flew the A-bomb and dropped it in Japan.
The actual same plane?
The actual same plane flown by the exact same outfit, flown out of Roswell to Fort Worth with this balloon inside of it.
Is the implication that they're like a prestigious group?
It's
like
neat. So if you want to look it up, B-29 Super Fortresses, they're enormous.
That's
they're
what I was going to
huge.
ask is
they're, to
how
make
big
one of
is
these
this
things
wreckage?
fly, it's a lot of fuel, a lot of people.
I think what Alex is asking, though, is like the crew, the reason why it's the same crew is if they could keep their mouths shut about like dropping bombs,
yes,
they could keep their mouths shut about transporting.
The idea
a ship
is
of
that
this nature.
we're looking at evidence that they employed the same discreet elite crew of pilots
Yes, same
who carried
exact people.
another precious piece of cargo, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Or just if you want to believe it, just use that plane, that car, that crew for a weather balloon.
Right. But how big was the wreckage?
We're gonna get to talk about all in detail what wreckage was found, how long it was kept, what the rancher saw, all that stuff. We're gonna talk all about
why
that.
you would need a super fortress. Like that's a huge.
Yeah,
that's
it's
a
a monster
thing.
ship. It's a monstrous plane.
Google that, audience. Look how big it is.
But let me continue a little while here. Following that official story was that it was a piece of wreckage as a part of the weather balloon, what's known as a radar reflector called a Rawensonde. I think that, and I'm probably butchering it, but it's spelled Rawinsonde. That's what the, after a day or two passed, that's what the official claim is what they picked up was a Rawensonde. So if you look that up, it's not really all that big. You can even look it up from the 40s. There's pictures of it from the 40s in case you don't want, modern one's not too different.
Oh, it's like one of those big white balloons, eh?
Yeah, more or less. So it's kind of like a deflated air thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sort of like loosey-goosey, droopy balloon that floats
Sorta.
high as hell up, yeah.
Yeah. General Ramey went on the Fort Worth radio station and explained things to calm things down. He also announced that he'd be on NBC to address the country later on. However, that never went through and it never happened. And that's where the story ends for most people. And that's certainly where the government forces it to end as best they can. But if one just looks a little deeper, there's a whole lot that doesn't make sense. How can something like a balloon crash into the ground so violently that it scattered its parts over a square mile? Why was the first press release under orders of a colonel speaking openly about a flying disc? Why fly the wreckage of such a simple thing on a B-29 Superfortress, the very same planes that carried the A-bomb to Japan? But over this multi-part series, we're ideally going to try and dissect that deep dive and drag everything out that we can get our hands on. And while it still might not be an actual physical alien craft, or is it? Who knows? There are plenty of other things that it could be that aren't a weather balloon. And so I'm super excited because now it's finally time to dive into Roswell. UFO sightings, while certainly hitting peaks and valleys through the decades, have been around longer than most people believe. While in the 40s, especially UFO fever was hitting a high, we can actually look back decades and centuries, as we've talked about on the podcast many times before, and still see claims of magnificent and weird shit in the sky all the time. True, by definition, UFO sightings. In the 19th century, plenty of captains of sea vessels and astronomers would see lights in the skies that would perplex them, moving in ways that confused them. And so they deemed them remarkable meteors, as they at least knew what a meteor was and could compare them to that.
Remies.
Is that?
I'm just trying to jazz it up. Like, I feel like remarkable meteors sounds like it was invented by
a 19th century astronomer?
Yeah, like the guys who built the dinosaurs wrong. You know what I mean? Like some kind of
Not everything needs to be like jazzed up though.
Dude, I'm just
They call
saying.
them Remies, kids.
Is that is that Alex's purpose though? Jazz
I'm
things
just saying,
up,
like,
man.
imagine you're on the radio. We're like, we have a remarkable meteor in sight. That's too much. It's a mouthful. Come on.
I mean, they didn't have radios back then.
I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying. You get what
All
I'm
right,
saying.
you know, I know what you're saying.
Wait, who didn't have radios back then? What year are you talking about?
The 19th century.
Yeah, like the olden times.
The
It
old
makes sense why they call it.
captain pilots and captain like astronomers on the seas.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
where we're
okay.
starting. We're
All
talking
right.
about that. Yeah, there's
All
no
right,
radios.
all
Basically.
right.
They don't need to jazz up remarkable meteors because it's very
I mean, they had telegraphs. They could have been like, remarkable media, stop, coming in, stop.
In the
short from now on. Stop.
In the late
Remy,
19th
stop.
century, remarkable meteors could be like the name of a magazine. Like,
That's
like,
true.
like
That's
Remarkable
very
Meteors, issue 31. Stories of the sky. Remies were seen floating over there.
Yeah.
Well, things get way more interesting as we push time a little forward. With the invention of airships, a rash of new reports were dubbed mystery airships in the sky. Think about, I think Jess even talked about it a little bit. Remember when Zeppelins and mystery Zeppelins in the sky, kind of ghost ships that flew around, that kind of thing. Those were being seen more and more. But it wasn't until we had airplanes in the sky that they truly became commonplace. Mystery airplanes were all around with no explanation. And reaching the end of World War II, we saw a huge uptick in UFOs. Tell me, gentlemen, if this sounds a little familiar. Soldiers at the end of World War II were starting to report and see things known as, quote, playful balls of light that would dip, dodge through the trees, and keep just out of range of the soldiers. Other playful balls of light would also be in the sky, tagging along beside the pilots as they flew. They were, by all accounts, docile, and the suggestions for natural phenomena were your common grab bag of things like St. Elmo's fire, which is the atmospheric discharge of static electricity. Or they would hand wave it away as enemies developing new secret technology, and they were using it to test.
How would they wave it away as that? It's probably just enemies testing super secret technology. No big deal.
Well, so to me, also at the same time, like, if that's true, why are they being passive?
And why are they characterizing them as playful?
Yes, also true. Why are they calling them playful balls of light?
Or playbolas, as we call them on the Chilluminati podcast.
What? Was that another?
No comment. I did
Playbolas.
not call them that.
A
No.
playful ball of light. Playbola.
So it wasn't just the U.S. seeing it either. There were reports of all soldiers, there were reports of all kinds coming from soldiers from every side of the war. And they would eventually be dubbed Foo Fighters, hence the term. And that's where the band gets their name. Then we get
the best.
I honestly couldn't think of a Foo Fighters song. So thank you for doing something because I don't have. I don't have anything.
And I wonder.
Could have gone with learn to fly.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Oh, that would have been a great reference right
All
there.
I really want to ask of you, do you believe a flying saucer crashed in the New Mexico desert in 1947?
I mean, do
I'm
you
not-
though? Do you believe?
I'm just going to put this out there, but my father was born in 47, and I'm not saying I always thought he was an alien, but
You are
what
a
if
star
he is?
child.
What if I'm a
you
star
feel like it was like
child?
a Superman scenario? Like
what
he
if
was
my
like a
dad was
baby?
Superman? Yeah, but he like wasted it on just like
Maybe he just
hanging
doesn't.
out.
Maybe he just got like. Maybe when he got exposed to yellow sun, he just like. Maybe he can just like fart really quietly. Like maybe it's just like not that big of
that
a
has
deal.
never been his power.
Okay, fair enough.
Never been his
Fair
superpower.
enough. I'm not on the inside on that one. I can't talk. I can't speak on that.
Oh,
Maybe he just like he's really good at making fall off the bone ribs. Like, you know, maybe it's just like a little
No, that's not true either. Unfortunately,
I mean, I'm just throwing them out as examples. Like I said,
Does he
I've
have,
never
like,
met-
Of course,
I've
of
never
course.
met the guy.
does he have like a dad dish that he just is really good at?
I mean, he used to make like a mean salsa. Do aliens make good salsa? Is that like a thing?
I don't
A
know.
mean salsa, that's just like what a dad does. I
Yeah,
make a mean
yeah.
salsa. It could just be tomatoes and onions, and it could be a mean salsa if your dad makes it.
Yeah, dads make mean salsas. Oh, but he would spice it up. You got to have the jalapenos.
Yeah,
in
you
there.
got to put
That's-
them in there.
And the onion. Come on now.
Ooh,
All right.
that sounds
Anyway,
good.
what are we doing?
Anyway, yeah, you're
Let's
making
continue.
me fucking hungry, dude. I need to eat.
Dave
Beyond
Grohl,
that,
was there, and it's time to talk about Foo Fighters. some
yeah.
more.
So Foo Fighters, that's what they dubbed them at the end of World War II. But sound familiar to Skinwalker Ranch? Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
No.
What?
Same
What?
type of stuff, same type of report.
Yeah, same kind of activity.
But what if we just like cut Skinwalker Ranch off from this discussion?
It's impossible.
I can never cut that out of
That's
my
why
life.
Skinwalker Ranch is the biggest scam of all.
Listen.
Because Skinwalker Ranch is everything. So every time you bring up anything, you have to be like, well, you know, like Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
The marketing on Skinwalker Ranch, the team is so good. They're like, well, yeah, Bigfoot, aliens, Chupacabra, Loch Ness Monster, it's all there. Parallel dimensions,
I put
it's all
the
there.
Loch Ness Monster
One-stop
was not
shop.
there. No one said that.
I
Nobody
put-
saw him there.
Dozens of hours
Not
of
the
my
Monster
life
Mash.
into reading and researching and outlining and scripting goddamn Skinwalker Ranch. I will bring it up as many times as I want to or need to.
I'm just saying, it seems like they're trying to it's like the late night infomercial
No,
of
no. Where the Loch Ness Monster was hanging out with the other guy who shot JFK.
they're all there. Yes.
Everybody's there, dude. Everybody's
Everyone's there.
Every time we cover, they go to Skinwalker Ranch after. Whatever we cover, it migrates to Skinwalker after.
You think I'm joking? That's what Skinwalker Ranch is. Let's not pretend that's what that is.
Maybe
Did you
Skinwalker
see-
Ranch is like like fables, but for cryptids and conspiracy theories.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's where they like retire. You know, they will live together in a community
the Skinwalker Ranch retirement community.
for cryptids.
For cryptids, yes.
And
Oh,
Right,
it's so
yeah.
good. That's another. Write that down.
Bigsby Bigfoot,
yeah.
right?
Mothman,
And,
He's the
obviously.
detective of the town.
Moss Man.
Yeah,
Boss
yeah.
man. he's
You obviously
off
they have
license.
they have to have a nurse, so Nurse Nessie, you know, Loch Ness
Right,
monster.
yeah, they're all there.
They're all
yeah.
there. It's all right.
The guy
Anyway,
who shot JFK has a paper bag over his head with a question mark on it all the time.
okay. So we push forward to 1946. The Scandinavian countries all across. Let me try to reword that. Scandinavian countries in 1946 were reporting tons of lights in the sky. Eventually, they would become known as Swedish ghost lights.
Swedish light balls.
Swedish light balls. But it wouldn't be until the summer of 1947 where all those events leading up to Roswell would happen. And so we shift our focus to Roswell, New Mexico. Now, it's funny that there's UFO flaps tend to happen during the summertime. I just want to point that out as well. I know I have this written down. I got to use it. The most active points in Skinwalker Ranch were during the summertime. It seemed to take winter off and not be active during the winter. And it seems similar here where there's a rash of stuff happening in the summer and then it all culminates to one big event and then it all stops and then nobody sees anything anymore.
Someone
It's
says
very
it was
bizarre.
Thinner there.
Yeah, perhaps a flap of some
A
sort.
flap of some kind. Some sort of thinning of the barrier between worlds.
We have
Just like at Skinwalker.
Yes.
Right.
You're starting to
Available
understand.
now for $29.99.
Lies.
Let's talk a little bit about Roswell, New Mexico as a whole. Much like when we did Skinwalker, I want to cover a little bit about the geography and history of the area. Roswell, New Mexico is located in Chavez County, which forms the entirety of the Roswell micropolitan area. It has a population of around 50,000, and the city was officially founded on August 20th, 1873. Roswell's been home to the New Mexico Military Institute since 1891, a 4-year high school and 2 junior colleges, whose presence contributed to the New Mexico becoming a state in 1912. In the 1930s, the city was chosen to house Dr. Goddard's rocket experiments, who remained for 12 years and led to Roswell being dubbed, quote, the cradle of space exploration, end quote. And then in 2012, fearless Felix Baumgartner left Roswell Airport in a balloon and floated 39,000-ish meters above the ground, which is around 24 miles or so, to the stratosphere before jumping and returning safely back to Earth. He set the record for exit altitude, highest manned balloon flight, and fastest speed of free fall at over 830 miles per hour.
Was that the Red Bull thing?
I think you might be right.
Where he it was live streamed and he jumped from that was amazing.
He was the first human to break the barrier of sound outside of a vehicle.
Yeah, that was like Iron Man shit. That was crazy looking.
Happened in Roswell, baby. Oh, they've got so much stuff that goes for them. However, the city was made famous for the July 1947 UFO crash. However, the crash was more closely located to Corona, New Mexico, at the Foster Sheep Ranch owned by Mac Brazel, the rancher we talked about a little earlier, with another crash happening in the plains of San Agustin, known as the Flats. However, as Corona is a small village with a population of under 200, Roswell was more well known and had more resources to investigate the crash, and kind of by umbrella and a suction effect, it all kind of became known as one event, the Roswell, New Mexico event. There's a sweet little, if you can actually go look, if anybody cares, there's actually a little map you can check out on Wikipedia that shows exactly where the crash sites are in relation to the cities, so you kind of know where it all happened. At this point, though, we're going to bump into the timeline of events. We're going to jump into the weeks leading up to the actual sighting now, and we're going to talk a lot about what was being seen, because a lot of it was very much the same. Summer 1947, I would personally consider a UFO flap, and it starts on the 25th of June in 1947. A lot of people just jump to the crash, but it was actually a dentist by the name of Dr. R.F. Sensenbauer who actually had the very first sighting. Out in Silver City, New Mexico, on a nice evening, the doctor ended up seeing what he described as, quote, a flying saucer-shaped object about 1/2 the size of the moon, unquote.
What?
And it was a saucer-shaped flying object about 1/2 size of the full moon.
Oh, in the sky. Okay.
In the sky.
I was like, what in the
like how
fuck
he
is
saw
he
it.
talking about? The
Yeah, I
Death
was
Star rolling up?
Mothership kind of? Like, what? Okay.
It was moving at a relatively high speed to the south of him. One day later, June 26th, 1947, Lexington, Kentucky, another doctor saw something. A doctor by the name of Dr. Leon Oettinger. He saw, quote, a large silver ball-shaped object, clearly not a balloon or a dirigible, traveling at high speed near the edge of the Grand Canyon, end quote. So this thing zipped by. Grand Canyon, a lot of UFO sightings out there, by the way. This silver ball-shaped object. Now, what that interests me, because people keep seeing saucers, but a lot of saucers, when they travel by people who see them, they don't actually travel like this, like you see in the movies. A lot of the time, what they see is the saucer flips up on it like a 90-degree angle and then moves forward like that, if that makes sense. So it kind of moves up, and then its front is like a flat plate moving forward.
Okay.
Am I giving you a good visual here?
Like it lands flat, and then it stands up like a rocket ship and takes off straight up into the air.
But it'll do that in the air. We'll just kind of flip onto its side, and it'll still travel forward, but it's traveling forward with its what could be considered at the top. Now it's front.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah.
What you're
So like it would propel like a helicopter does when it does it's angled down.
But like perfectly 90 degrees, not actually fully angled. Like it just goes whoop and then it moves.
Interesting.
I only
Now, are
say
you
that
saying
because
that-
he's saying he sees a ball, and I'm curious if he saw the front-facing part of the object or something along
It's
those
like
lines.
Boba Fett's ship. Like it's like
Yeah, kind of more like
Sure.
Boba Fett's
Okay,
ship.
yeah.
There we go. That's a
Yeah.
really good. That's a
Yeah.
really good comparison. Yeah, thank you, Star Wars. I don't know why I didn't jump to that.
George Lucas alien?
What? A Star Child?
complete.
I don't think George Lucas is an alien or a Star
1080p?
Child. I think George Lucas be the one that like wants to go breed with the aliens.
He's like the Richard Dreyfuss character.
That's why the Twi'leks are so hot.
What? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what.
I mean, yeah. You know,
Oh
you're
yeah.
not wrong.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just don't question. Like, he made them hot because he loves aliens, dude. That's the point. Anyway, the next day, the 27th of June, 1947, we have 5 sightings, all in the same day, scattered across a few different places. The first one is Tin Town, Arizona. A disc-shaped object overhead zipped by and apparently came down to Earth around 10:30 in the morning. This was reported by John Pesh, who is an electrician. So basically what he ended up seeing is a disc zipped over and then it came down like towards out of sight, but was moving down towards Earth. He believed to be moving toward it. And just
On
kind
the
of
27th.
this is on the 27th
Okay.
of this is like the next day after that. Sighting 2, also Arizona, but this time in Warren. The witness was actually a military man, Major George Wilcox. He saw a series of 8 or 9 perfectly spaced discs traveling at high speed with a wobbling motion. Discs passed over Wilcox's house at 3-second intervals heading east and estimated to be at a height of about 1,000 feet above the mountaintops.
Did these people know each other at all? They weren't close enough to like
No.
be. Yeah. Okay.
This is all no. And if to further, we're gonna actually move to New Mexico on the same day with a different sighting. So moving even out of Arizona. But this is somebody who has a little bit more credibility than I guess an electrician, seeing things zipping over his house and he, like I said, 1,000 feet over the mountaintops. That's not that high up. I mean, it's high, but not that high. The third sighting would be over in Pope, New Mexico, by a man known as W.C. Dobbs. He simply said, quote, "I saw a white disc glowing like an electric light bulb," unquote. And he said it was passing overhead. So a white disc, again, glowing, but this time glowing like a light bulb, I guess.
It really sounds like some people saw something. Like, was this all over the paper, or was this just like reports coming in?
These are all reports coming in over the course of the 2 weeks. People are reporting it as they would to, the Air Force base and such that you would, cops, police.
Right. So these aren't things that are being reported on, right? They're just like.
Correct. These are just reports of. So here's the next one. Fourth sighting, White Sands Missile Range. The witness, Captain E.B. Detchmendy. Minutes after the sighting we just talked about, the one above, the W.C. Dobbs one, this one happened, and it was another disc traveling quickly overhead, heading to the southwest of the base. So it zipped over the base in a southwest direction. Last one, sighting 5. San Miguel, New Mexico. Mrs. David Applezoller. She saw roughly an hour after sighting the fourth sighting, the one we just saw above. No, I say above because it's in my script. You guys can't see that. But the one we referenced a minute ago, she saw a similar object sighted over the city, also heading southwest. So the question is, if these are to be taken as real, and we can question them all you want, but is it the same craft that everybody's seeing and it's ripping by across the skies and over these states and just traveling in the same direction? Or is it multiple different things, maybe 2 different ships, or maybe even 3? I don't know. How's your feel? What's your feeling on this?
It's so hard to deny like a rash of sightings. If
2 military ones in the same day, 3 civilian
like,
ones.
if it's not paper, if it's not like media whipping up a frenzy, like, because that's the thing that really like
that
takes the
happens
wind.
after the crash.
That's what I mean. Like, that's the thing that really takes the wind out of the sails a lot of the time, is that it's like there's a bunch of reports, but it's because like it's getting covered in the paper every night.
I was gonna ask, like,
Yeah.
what is the what is the timing on these?
Timing between, what do you mean? Like,
When people came out and said,
On the 27th, it was 5 in one night.
yeah. These are all.
but did all 5 report it in one like that night?
That's a good question. don't.
That's the biggest concern for me is that I'm curious. You can say like 5 days later, oh yeah, that night I saw a thing, but I'm curious what the.
I know the reports came before the crash. I just don't know if they were that night or during the 2 weeks at some point during like exactly when.
Because
I imagine the military ones were reported immediately.
When you say like, oh, it's a it could be one or it could be many.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, I
it's
don't
all
know.
about, like what your point of view is, right?
Yeah.
Because if you want to believe that it's a ship that can move super fast, then it's one thing.
Yes.
But if you're like, well, I don't know, it could be many things. I'm really curious to see what the actual numbers are when it comes.
I will.
To who
How about this?
reported what.
I will make a note, and I'll come back to you with that in episode 2, and I will have that at the top just so I have an idea.
you.
And I'll go look
Regardless of what it is, though, I think it's hard to say that something didn't happen that night, especially since 2 of the reports were from military guys, right? Which means they probably were reporting that stuff in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's just like when you see modern day UFOs that are being obviously they're tracking something.
at that. Yes.
We just don't know what. And I think this is a perfect example of like something happened and it's been a cover up so long that it's been so like convoluted. We have no clue what actually occurred.
Right. Yeah, and it just the deeper you
probably
dig,
never
the
know.
more confusing it gets, which is just so it's so bizarre. Now we move over to the next day. Only one sighting, 28th of June, 1947, Alamogordo, New Mexico. Captain F. Divin, who was a pilot, saw, quote, a ball of fire with a fiery blue tail behind it, unquote, pass beneath his aircraft, and then it appeared to disintegrate.
Ball
Simple
of
as
fire
that.
with blue
With a blue tail behind it, went under his ship and appeared to disintegrate. Could be a meteor, could be something coming in, that to me sounds closer to like a weird meteor or something coming in. Who knows? But something to keep note of. Then 2 more sightings on the 29th of June, 1947, the next day. First one, Cliff, New Mexico. The witness was a bunch of Army Air Force pilots, just a bunch of them. They conducted a search for a fallen object reported to have fallen sometime before noon that day. However, they found nothing, but in their report, they reported a strange odor in the air. So they got a report of a strange object that apparently fell, checked it out.
So they went on
Nothing.
foot down?
Yeah, they went out there on foot. Mm-hmm.
And they smelled something.
They smelled something but saw nothing. No physical evidence of a crash, no destroyed trees, no burn marks, none of that stuff.
I hate to say it, but you know what other place is really famous
I
for its
know.
Skinwalker Ranch, baby.
But okay, so I'll get into depth. We'll talk about it again, but we're gonna see things that we've talked about before. The idea of if you really want to get weird with it, aliens being a mix of physical and psychic in nature, and that there may be like they're sightings, but then there's nothing there, and there's a smell, but there's no vehicle, even though the army was got pinged of a location.
Right, they're tracking it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's just fucking weird.
Who saw the object fall? Pilots?
The previous day, the object. You talking about that particular day?
When they went to go find it, and there was
they got a
bad
report
smell?
of a fallen object. I'm curious if it was the object prior that day. No, it wouldn't be because it was the prior day in a different town.
But
So
did
they
it
just got a
come
report
from- It just came from a
from their
civilian?
base. Like, hey, a report of it could have come from a civilian. It could have come from one of their scouts. Who
Okay.
fucking knows?
But they went out on an official.
They went on an official
I got it. Okay.
army business.
All right.
The second sighting was by Dr. C.J. Zahn the same day. This was in the White Sands Proving Ground. He simply saw a silver-colored disc that did a series of maneuvers at high altitude over a secret rocket test range. This is also very, very common with UFOs. Nuclear sites, missile sites. UFOs will come by, sometimes do nothing, sometimes do something, and then zip away. Sometimes they, what do you call them? Soldiers say they see them getting scanned. But this is also weird too. It kind of shows up, does a bunch of weird jerky maneuvers in the sky, and then takes off. Gone.
That's the thing. There's so many things in this case about like flying objects that are like maneuvering around.
Yep.
And I just don't see a weather balloon doing that.
And keep in mind too, this is happening how long after we dropped the A-bomb?
Like 2 years?
This is 1947. Yeah, so we dropped it in 46. Yeah, so 45?
That's a
I
Jesse
can't remember.
question. Not
Jesse,
an
when
Alex
did we drop
question.
the A-bomb in Japan in World War II? Was it 45 or 46?
To end the war,
Yeah.
45.
45. So a couple years later, we're looking at after we dropped the A-bomb. And there is an argument that if if it is extraterrestrial in nature, they took interest when we started splitting the atom and causing mass destruction. But again, a fun theory for another time. Anyway, that's what they saw on that day. 30th of June, 1947, the next day. Location, Albuquerque, New Mexico. A rail worker by the name of Price saw 13 silvery disc-shaped objects while we're traveling one after another. Initially heading south, they then changed course abruptly and then went east and then reversed dramatically going west before disappearing out of sight.
Like, what is that? Like, what could that be?
I don't know. It's so weird. It's so weird.
That's another official report, right?
That's a railroad worker. This is not a military site.
Right,
this is somebody called it into the police.
Yeah.
You know, blah blah blah. I saw this. Sighting 2 of that day was then in Tucumcari, I think is how you say it. Tucumcari, New Mexico. This was another just civilian, Helen Hardin. She was a Quay County Abstract Company employee.
Are we on the 30th now?
We are still, this is still the 30th.
Okay.
Sighting 2 of the 30th. The railroad worker was the 30th. This is also the 30th.
Okay.
She saw a flying saucer from her front porch traveling east to west at high speed, about half the size of the full moon with slight yellow cast. So it was glowing slightly yellow, going east to west, back and forth a bunch.
I wish she saw a lot of them. I wish she saw 13.
Yeah, but
That would
remember
be
the
so
general,
cool.
the general like earlier saw 9.
I know, like maybe they were buzzing the whole
Not
area.
the general, but it's weird. And then we get to the 1st of July, 1947, where we got 7. Okay, so it's 3 major sightings, but the third one is broken down into 9 because it was the same thing seen by a bunch of people all at once. So first sighting was Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is July 1st, 1947 again. Chamber of Commerce executive Max Hood saw a bluish disc zigzagging across the northwestern sky.
So that's another point for bluish.
Yep, bluish. This one, this time another government worker.
Yep.
Sighting 2, Phoenix, Arizona. So super far away from New Mexico. Witnesses were Mr. and Mrs. Frank Munn. They saw just a large object moving over the east of Phoenix. Just an object kind of going. And then the last one, which are 7 separate reports, all of the same thing. In Mexicali, from Mexicali to Juarez, Mexico, there were just reports of just civilians seeing flying discs from Mexicali all the way to Juarez. This was in Mexico, mind you, not in New Mexico or the States. This is further south.
That is crazy, man. Like I feel like whatever it was, there was probably multiple ones, and they were probably up there in the sky. You know,
Yep.
I don't know what else, but I don't know what else I'm willing to believe. But at least it's so many different reports.
Yeah, it's insane, and all just kind of going about their day. There's nothing like incredible about these sightings either. A lot of the times, you want to be like, well, I was out on my front porch, this thing landed and communicated with me, but really, these are just like really quick. Like I was walking and thing kind of zipped by and there it goes. Or I was at my base and they kind of did a bunch of dances and went east. And they're just very, very quick things. It's very bizarre. We have one more day with one more sighting before we actually have to move down to proper Roswell. July 2nd, 1947. This was in proper Roswell, New Mexico. Mr. and Mrs. Dan Wilmot. They claim to have seen a large glowing object as it passed over the home, traveling northwest at a high rate of speed. Again, something so simple, just kind of glowing and going by, right by their house in New Mexico. And that would be the last one of the sightings before the actual incident. And from here on out, there's going to be a lot of characters involved. As I said, this is probably one of the more in-depth ones we're doing. So this is going to be kind of part history, part crazy, hopefully all together and for an enjoyable thing. Because now we got to move into, I want to talk a little bit about the people involved so you understand who these people are when their names come up and just where their positions were within the government at the time. It's not like a huge list of 20 people,
Right.
Just about 7 or so that are worth noting. We've got W.W. Mac Brazel. This is the foreman at the Forest Ranch. This is the rancher that ended up having the crash happen on his ranch site. So Mac Brazel, rancher.
Is this the guy
Sheriff
from the
George?
picture?
Likely, yes. There's also Sheriff George A. Wilcox. He's the sheriff of Chavez County, which is the county Roswell's in. He's the one that ends up responding to the rancher and gets to see the debris first before the U.S. Army gets their hands on it. So it's important to know what he says with that in mind. Frank Joyce is a reporter and announcer for the Roswell radio station KGFL. He interviewed Mac Brazel on the telephone before the military arrived and was later told a different story entirely. We'll go about that as well. Major Jesse A. Marshall, you might recognize the name. We talked about him a little earlier. He's the one, the intelligence office at Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group intelligence officer. He picked up the material at the ranch and then later flew with it personally on the Super Fortress from Roswell, New Mexico to Fort Worth, Texas.
He was the same guy who flew with Little Boy?
He's what? Little Boy?
Bomb?
Yeah, no, he didn't fly with the bomb. He just flew personally with the crash debris from Roswell there. Then there's CIC Cavett. He's the counterintelligence officer. He picked up material at the ranch, has since denied any involvement despite multiple eyewitness testimonies putting him at the scenes. We'll talk about that as well. Gerald Anderson claimed to have found wreckage and bodies on the plains of San Augustine. That's the second crash site, but remember, about 120 miles from where Mac Brazel found the wreckage. 6 years old, and this was all 6 years old at the time. He was 6 years old at the time, Gerald. So again, important to keep that in mind when Gerald Anderson talks about what he sees. He was 6. Then there's Grady L. Barney Barnett. She claimed to found some wreckage and bodies in the plains of San Augustine as well. Also in the same-ish area, about 120 miles from where Mac Brazel found the wreckage. And then finally, Glenn Davis. He was a mortician for Roswell Army Airfield and claimed to have spoken with a nurse who had seen the alien bodies for herself. However, the nurse remains unidentified, of course. We do not know who that nurse was, nor if we can take that as a point of fact.
So he's just known because he has this one piece of hearsay.
Correct. That's one of those like, well, he might just be trying to get in on the story. You know, like, well, no, the nurse, she saw the aliens, dude. She saw them. She definitely saw them. So we're going to quickly talk a little bit about the actual event, and then we're going to leave the episode off. And we're going to move into episode 2 soon.
Damn.
Wednesday, July 2nd, 1947. The day of the last sighting that we talked about is actually the very beginning of the Roswell incident. Mr. and Mrs. Dunn Wilmot reported an oval-shaped object moving at an incredibly high rate of speed over their house in Roswell, New Mexico. During a thunderstorm in the Corona, New Mexico area, Mac Brazel heard a thunderclap that sounded like an explosion that he says sounds, quote, much different than thunder, end quote. William Woody also reported that he and his father watched a bright meteor described as white with a red tail streak across the sky, falling past the horizon out of sight. So this is all in July 2nd, 1947. You kind of take pieces. Each one saw a different thing. Brazel had the clap happen. Mr. and Mrs. Dan Wilmot saw an oval-shaped object fly over their house, just kind of like, whoa, neat. Oval-shaped fits tic-tac shape.
Whoa.
Wow.
Neat.
I don't know. What do you think they were saying in 1947 when they saw
wife, bro?
Did you in 1947, they were like, tubular, my guy.
Bodacious husband, bro. I know, wife,
Listen,
bro.
dude, this is what happens. I've been in the alien world too long now. I grew the hair. I smoke weed way too much. I'm gone. You can't save me.
Yeah, no, whatever, wife,
bro.
The war is
totally
just barely over, my dude.
Okay.
Thank God I survived the war to come back to you, wife, bro.
Hitler is freshly
Thanks.
buried, bro.
I hate you all. I hate you all.
So tell
right.
me, is there actually a theory that you're gonna get to that like explains, like in a like sort of like almost like lore way, like how all these people are seeing all these different craft? Is that like
Yes, but that's not gonna be till much later.
right? But there is that people
Yeah,
are.
yes, you fool. Not too much
later.
Please, Alex. Please, we'll get there eventually.
I'm just
All
so
right.
fascinated by the situation because, like, conceptualizing it like this, I didn't really realize that it was like a bunch of little things that sort of just all happened at once that
Yep.
everybody got involved in all together. I thought it was more like one thing that happened. Tommy
Yes.
Lee Jones was there.
He was.
and he joined the Men in Black, and he had to leave his girlfriend behind.
Here comes the
you know,
man out. He was gonna propose. He was gonna propose.
He had brought the flowers, and he gave them to the alien instead. It was so sad.
Yeah.
It was sad. It was
It was
very sad.
And but it's okay because they're all in a marble anyway. The end.
Yeah, true. Everything means nothing. We're just toys.
Bum, 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 bum.
Shout outs to my man. What's his name? Nasty Habits. What the hell's his name?
What?
Oingo
I don't know.
Boingo. Danny Elfman. There we go.
Danny Elfman?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oingo boingo.
Anyway, we gotta refocus and get through the event, boys.
Wait, but all right. So
It's
my
okay.
question for you is,
Sorry.
just so everyone understands what's going on.
Yes.
Leading up to this moment,
Yes.
there are numerous sightings
Numerous sightings over days, weeks.
over days. It is post World War II.
Yep.
We've dropped 2 atomic weapons. We are in sort of a post war, but introducing the space race concept.
It's a huge
Nazi
time.
scientists
Huge
have been
time for
recruited
America.
to join NASA. Like, I mean, that's pretty much what's going on, right? Like, there's,
Pretty much, yeah.
early NASA was a lot of Nazi rocket scientists.
It really was. Project
It's
Paperclip.
totally true.
We'll talk about that definitely one day. Paperclip is huge.
But
in
like
the, in
all of
this
these,
stuff.
all of these things are like happening right now. It's like there's a lot of
Excitement, buzz,
mystique on the government level. There's like a mystery. Like there's a lot going on as the world sort of reordering and restructuring itself. Because those of you who don't know, also a lot of the countries that exist currently today were formed post World War II.
Yep.
Like a lot of the world was restructured and reshaped.
Yeah.
After the end of that war.
It's very different, which is I find very, very interesting in this UFO context specifically. So that was July 2nd. The husband and wife saw the object. Brancher heard a bang, and then somebody reported seeing the bright object in the sky descend past the horizon. It's then the next day, on the 3rd of July, that due to the rain the night before, Mac Brazel actually could not go outside and check what happened in his fields where he heard the noise. So it was the next day that he was able to go outside and inspect his fields. And it was there that he found what he claims is a rain-soaked pasture past the sheep. He found scattered across the fields extending from the top of a small circle on the hills, ran down the arroyo-dried riverbed, up another hill, and disappeared into the riverside. Reports say 3/4 of a mile long, the 200-foot wide, with a gouge starting at the north end, extending 400 or 500 feet toward the other end. There, the debris lied, was so thick on the ground that the sheep couldn't actually even cross over it and had to be driven an extra mile to water. That gash in the ground was so big, the sheep couldn't get around it.
How the fuck big was the craft? What was going on? Why did
A
they
weather
need
balloon,
a
man.
super
It's just a
fortress?
weather balloon. What are you talking about? Weather balloon came down. It just fucking annihilated the ground for 3/4 of a mile.
What are those things called? Ronsons? How
Yeah.
big are they even?
Not that big. You can
Like,
look
as
at
big
it.
as a person. Like it's not like I could fit that inside my body.
Yeah, it's nuts. Not thinking much of it, however, and being the rancher that he was, Brazel decided to, for the shit of it, take some of the debris home and actually share it with some of his neighbors, Floyd and Loretta Proctor. The material they tried and they claimed. They sat at the table and they played with it, experimented with it. It was fascinating to them. And they claimed no matter how hard they tried, and they tried, this material could not be burned or cut.
Yeah, I remember some old TV show or something about this where he was saying he was trying to crinkle it up and he
Yep,
could and
and it
no
wouldn't-
matter what he would do, he'd like put it back and it would just not be wrinkled again.
Yep. It was always perfectly smooth, yet very malleable and flexible. They would try and tear it. They would try and burn it and nothing would happen. They'd take scissors to it and a knife to it and they couldn't cut it, but it could still be moved and flexible.
That's crazy.
Now imagine if that's what if this is a UFO, that's what the UFOs are made out of. I mean, it would explain like how easily they can move.
It's like James
But-
Cameron shit.
Yeah, really, it's wild. 3 days later, Brazel drove the 75 miles into Roswell proper. He stopped at the office of Sheriff George A. Wilcox, and Wilcox suggested that he call the military after he told him of what he found and what happened. So we did. And while they were waiting for the military officers to arrive, Wilcox ended up dispatching 2 deputies to the ranch. Frank Joyce said that he called the sheriff and asked if there was anything interesting happening at the office, and Wilcox told him that he should interview Brazel while he was there. Colonel Blanchard, commander of the 509th Bomb Group, Major Jesse A. Marshall, and the counterintelligence officer Cavett responded to the sheriff's call when he let them know of the crash and the materials that the rancher claimed to have found. The officers interviewed Brazel, examined some pieces of the material, and then Blanchard ordered Marshall and Cavett to accompany Brazel back to the ranch. So basically, he drove into Roswell with this stuff. He's like, "Hey, sheriff, this shit happened," and he laying it over. He's like, "Call the military." And so he called the military, and while they were there, he called over some of his other officers, and they kind of checked out the stuff. And then eventually the military showed up and then decided to take it and escort him back to the ranch.
Would you really take something like that if you were the military, if you didn't immediately know what it was?
That's a good question. I don't know what
so
standard procedure would be. I mean, there's context to it, right? Like,
I think during this time period,
yeah,
you would, because if you recall, they just came out of the militarization of the nation, right? Like, the reason why America did so well in World War II is because when the time came that we were like, all right, we're actually going to fight now after Pearl Harbor, like, the entire nation was like, your cars are now tanks. This thing, like, everything you do is for the war effort. America has never been like that since, so I think we don't have the context for why people would trust the military as much as they did in the 40s, which was like, yeah, we're all in this together, and like, good old Uncle Sam will look out for us, and we gotta watch out for G.I. Joe, like all this shit.
Yeah, we're like booming.
Contextually,
that makes sense. Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah. Now we're like, no, man, F that.
It just seems crazy that there would be like a mysterious substance, and that an officer would be like, pack it up. You know what I mean? Like, that seems crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, it's tough. It's so tough because, like Jesse said, the late 40s, this is just a time of mystery for the government too. So everything they're doing, they're probably just like, put a lid on it, put a lid on it, put a lid on it, put a lid on it.
And that's what's messed up is it's a time period where the public is like, we love the military. Yeah. Our boys in, I won't say boys in blue. Yeah, that's not true.
It's not.
Our boys in whatever color uniform they're wearing. But at the same time, it's also when the government's doing some really messed up, like, secret op shit.
Oh, yeah.
And the Cold War is kicking off, and like, it is everyone that, everyone from Hoover on up, like, it's all bad news.
Yeah.
So
it's unfortunate. And it makes it difficult when you want to know things like this shit. Yep. So moving forward, Colonel Blanchard, after that, this is after he sent back the rancher with his escort guard, I guess, back to 75 miles back to his ranch. Blanchard alerted the military headquarters of what he found or what was brought out. Acting on the orders from General Clements McMullen, passed to him by Colonel Thomas DuBose, they sealed some of that material that the rancher Brazel had brought to the sheriff's office. The material was then flown onto Fort Worth Army Airfield. Not the big super fortress one. This is just a piece of material that he brought. It was immediately brought to Fort Worth.
This is just a little proof of concept.
Yep. And remember, he and the Brancher had this material for about 3 or 4 days. He played with it for like 3 or 4 days.
Around, yeah.
Yeah, him and the neighbors, they were literally playing with it. It's what they did with it.
That's the other thing that's weird about this is they're like, we don't know where it is, or they didn't know that it existed. Because you'd think if it was like a craft that you lost, that you would just go get it the same day because you probably know exactly where it is, right?
Yeah, if this is like a U.S. test craft with a pilot inside and it gets annihilated, why did it take him driving into Roswell?
A beacon or something in there? You know what I mean?
But there is some interesting theories that we'll talk about that they could be another country's, the Cold War, Russia, a test vehicle of theirs that ended up crashing.
I heard some crazy theory one time about it being like a hoax from Russia.
Yep, there's a theory that they literally took a craft. We'll talk about this in episode 3 way deeper and why people kind of take it a little seriously, but. Yeah. And they filled it with physically deformed and mentally impaired children and sent it to crash, and that hoping that they would mistake the bodies of those physically deformed and mentally impaired children as aliens.
That just seems so fucked up to me. Like, how could that be the plan? Like, how?
And how is there any way that you can guarantee that whoever sees them is going to go aliens?
I mean,
I heard that potentially the plan, if that was the case, like one of the reasoning behind it was like, a lot of the reasoning behind a lot of the Russia stuff is like it's the Cold War. The Cold War is just starting, and it's Russia saying we can do whatever we want on your soil. And the justification is America's supposed to be like,
Oh, shit.
we have to cover this up. We don't want people to know, which seems very like spy movie-y, which I think who knows if that's real or not.
Yeah,
but it makes sense in like a noir film kind of way. Like we have to cover it up. They're on American soil.
Yeah, I mean it's an easier way to swallow it if you want to go that angle for sure. After the military officers left alongside with Brazel to escort him, the two deputies returned. Remember the sheriff sent out 2 deputies to check out the crash site with the debris. They came back after the military left with the rancher, and they reported to have found no debris in the debris field, but they did find a burned area in one of the pastures. The sand had been turned to glass and blackened. It looked as if something...
How hot does it have to be to glass sand?
And they said it looked as if something circular had touched down. Now, remember, these are the deputies that the sheriff sent out.
3,200 degrees.
That's insane.
To glass sand.
And there's no debris. It's gone. The debris is gone.
That's so
At least
hot.
as far as they saw. Yeah, and it's all burned down. The aircraft from Roswell was met at the Fort Worth Army Airfield by DuBose and Colonel Alan Clark. Clark received the plastic bag with the debris and walked to the command B-26 to fly it onto Washington, D.C. and General McMullen. So they literally brought this thing to Fort Worth, Texas in a baggie, handed it off, and now it's being flown to D.C.
Immediately to D.C. because they're like, it's a weather balloon.
Off. Goodbye.
Yeah.
See ya. Off to D.C. it goes.
No one was like, do you guys have anything silver and disc shaped that you guys sent out that we need to worry about?
Yeah, is there some secret tech going on?
It just doesn't make logical sense to me totally. That they
Exactly.
would, that they would do that with like...
It doesn't. Honestly, weather balloon, I don't buy it. But again, we'll talk about more of the evidence anyway. Because the trip back to the ranch was 75 miles and it was so dark, Brazel, Marcel, and Cavett being the 2 people from the military, arrived after dark, and they just ended up staying the night. They just spent the night there. Going on to the next day, Monday the 7th,
At the
1940s.
ranch?
Yeah, they stayed at the ranch overnight.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah. But that means the next day, Brazel was able to take them both out to the field where he found the debris. Marcel and Cavett walked the perimeter of the field and then ranged out looking for more debris or another crash site maybe that was in the area, but ended up finding nothing. Finally, they returned and spent the remainder of their day collecting what debris they still could. They loaded the rear of Marcel's 1942 Buick convertible, as well as the Jeep carryall driven by Cavett, and left the field around dusk. So, while they weren't able to find any debris, what ended up happening is the rancher took a lot of the debris beforehand during those 3 days, and he moved it into his giant barn. And that's where most of it was. So they took what they could out of there, and they loaded up the trucks with what debris they had, and they left. The next day, Marcel stopped by his house on the way to the base. He awakened his wife and son to show them the material he had. They spent an hour examining this thing, scattered all on the kitchen floor. After, Marcel collected it all, loaded it into the car, and drove to the base. He took a detour with this shit, woke up his family, and just was like, hey guys, wanna see something cool? And he just fucking put it out there. And then a kid and a wife played with it for an hour.
I don't understand. I like, what could this have been? Why do we know that?
All the interviews, the investigative journalists over the years hunted these people down and just got stories from them in their older years.
What lands that the government doesn't come looking for almost 5 days that they immediately fly to Washington, D.C., and also the guy was so excited about that he showed it to his wife. You wouldn't show like a spy craft to your wife.
Yeah.
You wouldn't show like a piece of balloon to your wife.
Maybe. I don't know. You don't know what. I mean, you.
Like, I wouldn't
Not
show a
many
spy
people
craft to
have
my
seen
wife
that kind of
because I'd be
stuff.
worried that I'd take a bullet for it. You know what I mean? Like, a spy, it's like, oh, this is dangerous. I don't know about
It's all
like,
loosey-goosey, right?
Yeah.
It feels all very loosey-goosey, right?
Yeah, it
And
feels
nobody
sloppy.
seems to be giving a shit. Everybody's sharing it with everybody else. Everybody's like, look how cool this shit is. But it's right after that Marcel and Cavett visited with Blanchard, the other military guy that they've been talking to, in his quarters, telling him what they'd seen with the material and so on. Blanchard then called the Provost Marshal, Major Edwin Easley. Blanchard ordered Easley to post guards on the roads around the crash site, denying all access to anyone without official business. Blanchard also ordered Easley to find Brazel and have him escort the MPs to the site. Blanchard also called the 8th Air Force headquarters and advised them that Marshall had returned with more debris. The 8th Air Force headquarters in Fort Worth relayed Blanchard's message up the chain of command, alerting the Pentagon about the material. A special flight from Andrews was granted from men coming from the Pentagon, and that's when we can say the government, in a weird way and officially, put a lid on Roswell. It's at that moment they blocked everything up. They stopped people from going in, going out, and everybody was beginning to get new orders to change their stories. And that is where we're going to leave Roswell Part 1 off.
What in the hell, man? It just doesn't feel... I don't hear it and feel like, oh, this is nothing. Like sometimes you read about a thing and you're like, this is definitely an interesting little story, but like if I'm thinking about this, it's easily made up by one guy. You know?
Yep.
This doesn't have that tang to it.
The fun stuff isn't even happening yet, boys. I'm just saying.
The issue with Roswell, as far as I can see, is that there have been so many interviews conducted over years and years and years and years that the story we have now is like the extrapolation of all those interviews put together.
Yes, it's very much like taking different puzzle pieces and just trying to.
And that's why there's parts of it that you're like, wait, what? Like, wait, what? Because there's certain things that don't make sense across the board, but it's because it's been, what, 70, 60 years now?
Something around those lines, yeah.
And
we just passed an anniversary of Roswell, actually, a few days ago.
And it's one of those things where so many people have added to the story or had deathbed confessions or said different things that there's a lot of convolution as well. I don't know. I mean, there's some things where I'm like, oh, well, that could totally be a real thing. But at the same time, I'm like,
me too.
This guy is clearly a plant, right? There's like weird things in this story that do not check out. And it is, the deeper we get, the more it's like, wait a minute, what is this?
Well, we're going to talk, like, I'll give you a peek in the next episode. We're going to really talk heavily about the wreckage and the material itself. And apparently the claims of symbols that were seen along the edges of it. All that stuff is in Wacky Town. But we'll talk a little bit more about that because we're going to learn about the MJ-12 and all that next episode.
And let's take a minute to realize the importance of the fact that at its core, what Roswell is saying is that if
yes,
these are aliens, if these are aliens, the story here is that post-atomic weapon usage, aliens started to appear on Earth as like, we know you guys are about to enter a new age. We're here to do this whole, like, make sure you're on the up and up. But aliens that can travel across, however you think aliens travel, dimensions or space and time or whatever, they just, like, crash. Like, an alien ship just crashed. Like, it seems insane. Like, there's so much to this. An alien ship, they imagine, like, we made it across the galaxy and we crashed in a field.
Well,
like,
Jesse, what if I told you that it didn't necessarily crash by malfunctioning?
Oh, shit.
But we were tracking it and shot it down out of the sky.
Oh, shit.
Then why aren't we destroyed? Why aren't we as a world destroyed?
Well, we'll talk about that because
unless, oh my God, this is all the Matrix and they did destroy us.
I mean, honestly, what if we mean so very little? Like, we're just like an ant. It's like an ant biting us.
Isn't that the plot of Saints Row? Doesn't that happen?
Actually, yes,
I think
it does.
Saints Row 4, where like aliens invade and put us in the Matrix. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is the plot of Saints Row 4. Yeah, aliens invade. And
Disclosure has been happening in all mediums of entertainment, everybody. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of Roswell. I am so excited to dive into this 3 or 4-parter. I don't know what it's going to be, but this has been, I'm so excited to keep going. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, if you want and you've been listening and you want to leave us a good review or a review where you listen, it does a lot to keep us kind of at the top and where people finding us and discovering us. We're at over 1,200 reviews on iTunes now.
Wow.
Maintaining that 5-star average. We constantly crack into the top 10 improv comedy.
Improv comedy?
Yeah, we do. We're in the top 10 podcast.
Is there not
improv.
a paranormal podcast?
There is not, but we do crack into the top 50 true crime podcasts regularly as well.
Get wrecked.
We should be #1 paranormal podcast.
There's no paranormal like.
There should be.
Are they saying because it's not
category.
real? Because I tend to agree.
So we're comedy. We're a comedy podcast.
Who are we slam dunking
Ourselves.
right now?
And we're slam dunking ourselves and all those on Patreon who gives us their money. Thank you so much. We're gonna go record a mini-sode. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so on Twitter. I'm at Mathis Games, Alex at Fossian AA, Jesse's at Jesse Cox, and the podcast at Chilluminati Pod. Same thing on the Reddit. God, Jesse, you have so many dreams. I'm so ready to have you dream interpret next time we do a fan sode.
Boy.
It's gonna be great. But we're out of here. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Patreon.com/Chilluminati Pod.